Captain Marcus Wellington had served the crown of Aldoria for 15 years, but nothing had prepared him for what he discovered that cold October evening. The palace corridors echoed with his footsteps as he made his way through the ancient stone hallways, carrying documents that would shake the very foundation of the monarchy. The kingdom of Aldoria had always prided itself on tradition and honor. King Edmund V ruled with wisdom, while Queen Isabella maintained the grace and dignity expected of royalty. But it was the Crown Prince Alexander's recent marriage to Lady Catherine Blackwood that had set tongues wagging throughout the kingdom. Lady Catherine came from a wealthy merchant family that had risen to prominence through shrewd business dealings and political connections. The Blackwood family had successfully positioned themselves within the inner circles of nobility, despite their relatively recent arrival to aristocratic society. Her father, Lord Harrison Blackwood, was known for his ambitious nature and his ability to navigate the complex web of court politics. Marcus had first noticed irregularities 3 months earlier when he was assigned to review security protocols for the royal family's financial dealings. As head of the Palace Guard's intelligence division, he had access to confidential records that most courtiers never saw. What began as routine background checks on new staff members led him down a path of discovery that would challenge everything he believed about the monarchy he had sworn to protect. The investigation started innocently enough. A new footman had been hired, someone recommended by the Blackwood family. Standard procedure required thorough vetting of anyone with access to the royal quarters. During this process, Marcus noticed discrepancies in the employment records of several other staff members, all of whom had connections to Lady Catherine's family network. Late nights in the palace archives revealed a pattern of systematic placement of individuals throughout the royal household. Kitchen staff, groundskeepers, personal assistants, and even some minor administrative officials all shared curious connections to businesses or organizations linked to the Blackwood Empire. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniably deliberate. The first major breakthrough came when Marcus discovered encrypted correspondence hidden within routine supply invoices. The codes were sophisticated, clearly the work of someone with intelligence training. After weeks of painstaking analysis, he managed to decode several messages that revealed a network of information gathering that extended far beyond normal court gossip. The decoded messages spoke of meetings, financial transfers, and strategic positioning within the palace hierarchy. They referenced something called the Succession Project, a phrase that sent chills down Marcus's spine. The implications were staggering if his suspicions proved correct. Queen Isabella, despite her public composure, had been struggling with a serious illness that the royal physicians were working desperately to keep private. Only the immediate family and a handful of trusted advisors knew the true extent of her condition. Yet somehow, the Blackwood network seemed to have detailed information about her medical treatments and prognosis. Marcus realized that someone was systematically gathering intelligence on the royal family's most private matters. Medical records, financial documents, personal correspondence, and even details about the succession plans were being monitored and reported through this hidden network. The guard captain faced an impossible dilemma. His oath of loyalty demanded absolute discretion, yet the evidence suggested a conspiracy that threatened the very institution he had sworn to protect. The weight of his discovery pressed heavily on his shoulders as he considered the potential consequences of both action and inaction. Prince Alexander appeared genuinely devoted to his new wife, showing no awareness of the extensive intelligence operation that had preceded and followed their union. Lady Catherine played her role as the devoted princess perfectly, attending charity events, supporting worthy causes, and maintaining the image of a modern royal who could bridge the gap between tradition and contemporary society. But Marcus now understood that every public appearance, every charitable endeavor, and every social connection was potentially part of a larger strategic plan. The Blackwood family had not simply married into royalty, they had systematically positioned themselves to influence and potentially control the monarchy from within. The evidence continued to mount as Marcus delved deeper into the conspiracy. Financial records showed unusual patterns of investment and wealth accumulation that seemed to anticipate royal policy decisions before they were publicly announced. The Blackwood business empire had profited remarkably from government contracts and legislative changes that aligned perfectly with their commercial interests. As October drew to a close, Marcus made a decision that would forever alter the course of his life and, potentially, the future of the kingdom. the truth, no matter how dangerous or uncomfortable, needed to be revealed. The integrity of the crown depended on it, and his duty as a royal guard demanded nothing less than complete honesty in the face of this unprecedented threat. Standing in his private office that evening, surrounded by months of carefully gathered evidence, Captain Marcus Wellington prepared to set in motion events that would expose the most sophisticated conspiracy in Aldoria's royal history. The hidden truth about Lady Catherine's family was about to emerge from the shadows, and the kingdom would never be the same. The following morning brought unexpected developments that would accelerate Marcus's investigation beyond anything he had anticipated. A young palace maid named Sarah Hughes approached him with trembling hands, carrying a letter that had been accidentally delivered to the wrong quarters. Sarah had been working in the East Wing when she noticed Lady Catherine's personal secretary behaving strangely. The woman had been burning documents in the fireplace of her private office, despite the warm weather making such fires unnecessary. When Sarah knocked to deliver fresh linens, she observed the secretary quickly hiding a stack of papers and acting nervous about her presence. The maid had found the misdirected letter later that afternoon while cleaning the secretary's desk. The envelope bore the royal seal but was addressed to someone named Helena Blackwood, a name that didn't appear on any official palace roster. Inside, the letter contained detailed information about Queen Isabella's upcoming medical procedures and the planned announcement of her temporary withdrawal from public duties. Marcus examined the letter carefully, noting the official stationery and the authentic royal seal. Someone within the palace's inner circle was actively feeding confidential information to unauthorized recipients. The discovery confirmed his worst fears about the extent of the intelligence network operating within the royal household. The investigation took on new urgency as Marcus realized that Queen Isabella's health crisis was being monitored and potentially exploited by hostile forces. The Blackwood family's interest in the succession wasn't merely opportunistic, it was strategic and well-informed. They knew exactly when and how the royal dynamics would shift, allowing them to position themselves advantageously. Further examination of palace records revealed that Helena Blackwood was Lady Catherine's aunt, a woman who had supposedly died in a carriage accident 5 years earlier. Yet here was evidence of ongoing correspondence with someone using her identity. Either Helena Blackwood had faked her death, or someone was operating under her name with intimate knowledge of family secrets and royal protocols. Marcus decided to investigate the supposed death more thoroughly. The accident had occurred in a remote part of the kingdom, and the local authorities had accepted the identification based on documents provided by the Blackwood family. No independent verification had been conducted, and the body had been buried quickly due to claimed extensive injuries that made viewing impossible. The trail led Marcus to the Provincial Records Office, where he discovered that Helena Blackwood had indeed been Lord Harrison's sister, but she had also been a former intelligence operative who had worked for foreign governments before supposedly settling down to a quiet life in the countryside. Her expertise in surveillance and information gathering would explain the sophisticated nature of the palace conspiracy. Meanwhile, Prince Alexander began experiencing unusual pressure from his new in-laws regarding various royal prerogatives and decisions. Lord Harrison frequently suggested policy changes that would benefit his business interests, always framing these recommendations as being in the kingdom's best interests. Lady Catherine supported these suggestions, presenting them as progressive reforms that would modernize the monarchy. The prince, genuinely in love and trusting his wife's judgment, began implementing several of these recommendations without fully understanding their broader implications. Tax policies shifted in ways that advantaged certain industries, trade agreements were modified to favor specific business partnerships, and government contracts were awarded through processes that seemed fair but subtly favored Blackwood-connected enterprises. Marcus observed these changes with growing alarm, recognizing the pattern of influence that was reshaping royal policy from within. The Blackwood family wasn't simply seeking social advancement, they were systematically redirecting the kingdom's resources and political power to serve their own interests. The guard captain's investigation revealed that the conspiracy extended beyond the immediate royal family. Several members of parliament had received significant financial support from Blackwood-affiliated organizations during their election campaigns. These politicians now formed a loose coalition that consistently supported legislation favorable to the family's business empire. The web of influence was vast and sophisticated, involving carefully placed individuals throughout the kingdom's power structure. What had initially appeared to be a simple case of social climbing was actually a comprehensive strategy to gain control over Aldoria's political and economic systems through manipulation of the monarchy. Queen Isabella's illness provided the perfect opportunity to accelerate these plans. With her influence waning due to health concerns and King Edmund increasingly relying on his son's judgment, the Blackwood family could effectively control royal policy through their influence over Prince Alexander and Lady Catherine. Marcus discovered that several key royal advisors had been gradually replaced over the past year with individuals who had subtle connections to the Blackwood network. These appointments had seemed routine at the time, but, in retrospect, they represented a systematic infiltration of the monarchy's decision-making apparatus. The evidence painted a picture of a long-term conspiracy that had been years in the making. The romance between Prince Alexander and Lady Catherine, while genuine on his part, had been carefully orchestrated by her family as part of their broader strategy. Every aspect of their relationship, from their first meeting at a charity gala to their elaborate wedding ceremony, had been planned and executed with precision. As November arrived, Marcus realized that the conspiracy was approaching its final phase. Queen Isabella's condition was deteriorating rapidly, and preparations were being made for Prince Alexander to assume greater responsibilities as heir apparent. The Blackwood family was positioning themselves to effectively control the kingdom through their influence over the future king. The weight of this knowledge pressed heavily on Marcus as he prepared to take action. The evidence was comprehensive and damning, but revealing it would inevitably destroy Prince Alexander's marriage and potentially destabilize the monarchy during its most vulnerable period. The guard captain faced the most difficult decision of his career, knowing that the fate of the kingdom hung in the balance. Time was running out, and Marcus knew that he could no longer remain a silent observer. The conspiracy had to be exposed before the Blackwood family could complete their takeover of the Eldorian monarchy. The future of the kingdom depended on his courage to reveal the truth, regardless of the personal cost to those he had sworn to protect. Marcus knew he needed allies if he hoped to expose the conspiracy successfully. His first approach was to Lord Chancellor William Ashford, the king's most trusted advisor and a man known for his unwavering integrity. Ashford had served 3 generations of royalty and commanded respect throughout the kingdom for his wisdom and discretion. The meeting took place in Ashford's private study, away from the prying eyes and ears that Marcus now knew were everywhere within the palace. The older man listened intently as Marcus presented his evidence, his withered face growing increasingly grave with each revelation. The documentation was thorough and compelling, leaving little room for doubt about the scope of the conspiracy. Lord Ashford's initial reaction was one of disbelief, not because he doubted Marcus's integrity, but because the implications were so staggering. The idea that the monarchy had been systematically infiltrated by a merchant family seeking to control the kingdom through manipulation and deception challenged everything he believed about the security of royal institutions. After reviewing the evidence for several hours, Ashford made a decision that would prove crucial to the unfolding crisis. Rather than confronting the king directly, he suggested they needed additional verification and a carefully planned approach to minimize damage to the monarchy's reputation and stability. They agreed to conduct a discreet investigation into Helena Blackwood's supposed death and the current activities of the mysterious correspondent. Meanwhile, the palace continued to function normally on the surface, but Marcus now observed everything with heightened awareness. Lady Catherine's daily routines, her private meetings, and her correspondence patterns all took on new significance as he monitored the conspiracy's ongoing activities. The breakthrough came when Marcus intercepted a coded message intended for Helena Blackwood. The encryption was more sophisticated than previous communications, suggesting that the conspiracy was entering a critical phase. After working through the night, Marcus and a trusted cryptographer managed to decode the message, revealing plans for what they called the final transition. The decoded message outlined a timeline that aligned disturbingly with Queen Isabella's medical prognosis. Within weeks, the Queen would need to announce her temporary withdrawal from public duties, effectively making Prince Alexander the de facto ruler. At that moment, the Blackwood family planned to implement a series of policy changes that would fundamentally alter the kingdom's power structure. These changes included new legislation that would grant unprecedented authority to the prince consort's family, economic policies that would benefit their business empire, and appointments that would place their allies in key government positions. The conspiracy wasn't just about gaining influence, it was about permanently reshaping Eldoria's political system to serve their interests. Lord Ashford's investigation into Helena Blackwood's death yielded disturbing results. The local officials who had handled the case had received substantial financial compensation for their discretion, and several witnesses to the supposed accident had subsequently left the area after receiving unexpected windfalls. The evidence strongly suggested that Helena Blackwood had indeed faked her death to operate more freely as the conspiracy's intelligence coordinator. The revelation that Helena was alive and actively coordinating the palace infiltration added a new dimension to the threat. Her intelligence background and apparent resources made her a formidable opponent who understood how to operate within the shadows of royal protocol and security procedures. Prince Alexander, still unaware of the conspiracy surrounding his marriage, began experiencing pressure from multiple directions as various factions attempted to influence his decisions. Lady Catherine presented these influences as normal aspects of royal responsibility, skillfully managing his perceptions while advancing her family's agenda. The prince's genuine love for his wife made him particularly vulnerable to manipulation. He trusted her completely and valued her counsel, never suspecting that her advice was carefully crafted to serve interests other than the kingdom's welfare. His natural desire to be a good husband and future king played directly into the conspiracy's hands. Marcus observed several concerning developments as the conspiracy accelerated its timeline. Key military officials began receiving reassignments that would place Blackwood allies in strategic positions. Financial institutions were being quietly pressured to support policies that would benefit the family's business interests. Even the kingdom's diplomatic relationships were being subtly influenced through the prince's decision-making process. The scope of the conspiracy's reach became clear when Marcus discovered that several foreign governments were aware of the Blackwood family's activities and were positioning themselves to benefit from the anticipated changes in Eldoria's leadership. What had begun as a domestic power grab was evolving into an international political realignment with far-reaching consequences. Queen Isabella's deteriorating health provided the perfect cover for these preparations. The royal family's focus on her medical care and the emotional strain of her condition made them less attentive to the political maneuvering occurring around them. The conspiracy exploited this vulnerability with ruthless efficiency. As December approached, Marcus realized that the window for action was rapidly closing. The evidence was overwhelming, but presenting it would require careful timing and strategic planning to prevent the conspiracy from succeeding despite being exposed. The Blackwood family had positioned themselves so thoroughly throughout the kingdom's power structure that simply revealing their activities might not be sufficient to stop them. Lord Ashford agreed that they needed to move quickly but carefully. A direct confrontation without proper preparation could backfire spectacularly, potentially allowing the conspiracy to succeed while discrediting those trying to expose it. They began developing a plan that would reveal the truth while protecting the monarchy's stability and the kingdom's security. The plan required precise timing, reliable allies, and absolute secrecy until the moment of execution. Marcus understood that they would have only one opportunity to expose the conspiracy successfully. If they failed, the Blackwood family would complete their takeover of the monarchy, and Eldoria would be forever changed. The fate of the kingdom now rested on the actions of a loyal guard captain and an aging chancellor, both of whom understood that their duty to the crown required them to risk everything to preserve the integrity of the institution they had sworn to protect. The moment of truth was rapidly approaching, and there would be no second chances. The plan that Marcus and Lord Ashford devised required perfect execution and unwavering courage. They decided to present their evidence to King Edmund during the annual Royal Council meeting, when all the kingdom's highest-ranking officials would be present. This approach would ensure multiple witnesses and prevent the Blackwood family from suppressing or discrediting their revelations. However, they first needed to secure Helena Blackwood and prevent her from warning the rest of the conspiracy. Marcus had tracked her location to a remote estate in the northern provinces, where she had been operating under a false identity while coordinating the intelligence network. The mission to apprehend her would be dangerous and require absolute secrecy. Marcus assembled a small team of his most trusted guards, men who had served with distinction and whose loyalty was beyond question. They traveled to the northern estate under the cover of a routine security inspection, maintaining their normal duties to avoid suspicion. The approach required careful planning to avoid alerting Helena to their true purpose. The estate where Helena operated was heavily secured, but Marcus's team possessed the training and authority needed to overcome these defenses. They conducted a dawn raid that caught the conspiracy's intelligence coordinator completely off guard. Helena Blackwood was indeed alive and had been orchestrating the palace infiltration from her hidden command center. The evidence they discovered at the estate was even more damning than Marcus had anticipated. Detailed files on every member of the royal family, comprehensive plans for the kingdom's political restructuring, and correspondence with foreign agents revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. Helena had been working not just for the Blackwood family, but for multiple interests that sought to destabilize Aldoria's independence. Meanwhile, Lord Ashford had been carefully positioning loyal allies throughout the palace to prevent the conspiracy from escaping or destroying evidence when the revelation occurred. The Lord Chancellor's experience and political acumen proved invaluable in identifying trustworthy individuals who could be counted on to support the monarchy's legitimate interests. The confrontation began during the Royal Council meeting when Lord Ashford requested permission to address urgent security concerns affecting the crown. King Edmund, already worried about his wife's health and the increasing complexity of royal duties, granted the request without suspecting the magnitude of what would be revealed. Marcus entered the council chamber with Helena Blackwood in custody, along with boxes of evidence that documented the conspiracy's activities. The shock on the faces of those present was immediate and profound, particularly Prince Alexander, who began to understand that his marriage had been built on deception and manipulation. Lady Catherine maintained her composure initially, denying any knowledge of her family's activities and claiming to be as shocked as everyone else. However, her carefully constructed facade began to crumble as Marcus presented detailed evidence of her direct involvement in the intelligence gathering and policy manipulation that had occurred since her marriage. Lord Harrison Blackwood, who was present at the council meeting as part of his recent appointment to an advisory role, attempted to deflect blame and minimize the conspiracy's significance. He claimed that his family's activities were simply good business practices and that any appearance of impropriety was the result of misunderstanding and coincidence. The evidence, however, was overwhelming and undeniable. Financial records, decoded communications, witness testimonies, and Helena's own confession painted a clear picture of a systematic effort to control the monarchy through infiltration and manipulation. The scope of the conspiracy shocked even Marcus, who had uncovered much of it himself. King Edmund's reaction was one of profound betrayal and anger. The monarch had prided himself on his ability to protect the kingdom and maintain the integrity of royal institutions. Discovering that his own family had been systematically deceived and manipulated struck at the core of his identity as a ruler and protector of his people. Prince Alexander's emotional state was perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of the revelation. His genuine love for Lady Catherine made the discovery of her family's deception and her own involvement particularly devastating. The prince struggled to reconcile his personal feelings with his duty to the crown and the kingdom. The immediate aftermath of the revelation was chaotic as various officials and courtiers began to understand the implications of what had been exposed. Some members of parliament who had been influenced by Blackwood money attempted to distance themselves from the conspiracy, while others maintained their positions and claimed ignorance of the family's true agenda. Lady Catherine's final attempt to salvage her position involved claiming that she had been manipulated by her family and was as much a victim as the royal family itself. However, the evidence clearly showed her active participation in intelligence gathering and policy influence, making her claims of innocence impossible to sustain. The security implications of the conspiracy extended far beyond the immediate royal family. Foreign governments that had been positioning themselves to benefit from the Blackwood family's anticipated success now faced the prospect of diplomatic complications and potential retaliation from a monarchy that understood how it had been targeted. As the full scope of the conspiracy became clear, King Edmund faced difficult decisions about how to respond to the threat while maintaining the stability and dignity of the monarchy. The revelation had prevented the conspiracy's success, but the damage to royal credibility and the kingdom's security would require careful management and decisive action. The Blackwood family's systematic infiltration of royal institutions had been thorough and sophisticated, requiring comprehensive countermeasures to identify and remove all compromised individuals and systems. The cleanup process would be extensive and time-consuming, but essential for restoring the monarchy's integrity and the kingdom's security. Marcus's courage in exposing the conspiracy had saved the kingdom from a sophisticated takeover attempt, but the revelations also highlighted dangerous vulnerabilities in royal security and governance that would need to be addressed to prevent similar threats in the future. The guard captain's loyalty and dedication had proven instrumental in preserving Aldoria's independence and constitutional monarchy. The confrontation in the royal council chamber marked the end of the Blackwood conspiracy, but it also represented the beginning of a new chapter in the kingdom's history, one that would require careful rebuilding of trust and comprehensive reforms to prevent such systematic deception from threatening the crown again. The aftermath of the conspiracy's exposure required immediate and decisive action from King Edmund and his loyal advisors. The kingdom's security had been compromised at the highest levels, and restoring confidence in royal institutions would demand both justice and comprehensive reform. Helena Blackwood's interrogation revealed the full extent of foreign involvement in the conspiracy. Several neighboring kingdoms had been secretly supporting the Blackwood family's infiltration efforts, hoping to gain influence over Aldoria's policies and resources. These revelations had significant diplomatic implications that would affect the kingdom's international relationships for years to come. The legal proceedings against the conspiracy members were unprecedented in Aldorian history. Lord Harrison Blackwood faced charges of treason, fraud, and conspiracy against the crown. Lady Catherine's situation was more complex due to her marriage to Prince Alexander, but the evidence of her active participation in the conspiracy could not be ignored. Prince Alexander's personal struggle with the revelations became a matter of public interest and concern. The prince's genuine love for his wife conflicted with his duty to the kingdom and his role as heir to the throne. His decision regarding Lady Catherine's fate would test his character and determine his fitness for future leadership. The comprehensive review of palace security revealed the extent to which the Blackwood conspiracy had penetrated royal institutions. Dozens of staff members, advisors, and officials had connections to the family's network, requiring careful investigation to determine their level of involvement and complicity. Marcus Wellington found himself at the center of the kingdom's gratitude and the royal family's appreciation. King Edmund personally commended the guard captain for his courage and dedication, recognizing that his actions had prevented a catastrophic loss of sovereignty. The investigation and exposure of the conspiracy became a defining moment in Marcus's career and legacy. The cleanup process extended beyond the immediate palace environment to include Parliament, the military, and various government institutions that had been influenced by Blackwood money and manipulation. Identifying and removing compromised individuals while maintaining governmental stability required careful coordination and strategic planning. Queen Isabella's health crisis, which had provided cover for the conspiracy's acceleration, took on new significance as the royal family dealt with the emotional and political aftermath of the revelations. Her condition improved somewhat as the stress of the hidden threat was removed, though her long-term prognosis remained uncertain. The international community watched Aldoria's response to the conspiracy with great interest, as the kingdom's handling of the crisis would influence future diplomatic relationships and security cooperation agreements. The exposure of foreign involvement in the conspiracy created tension with several neighboring nations. Lord Ashford's role in supporting Marcus and coordinating the conspiracy's exposure earned him renewed respect and trust from King Edmund. The Lord Chancellor's experience and wisdom proved invaluable in managing the complex political and legal challenges that followed the revelation. Lady Catherine's trial became a focal point for the kingdom's justice system and public opinion. Her marriage to Prince Alexander complicated the legal proceedings, but the evidence against her was substantial and could not be dismissed due to her royal status. The trial would test the kingdom's commitment to equality under the law. The Blackwood family's business empire faced systematic investigation and potential seizure of assets obtained through their conspiracy against the crown. The financial implications were significant, as their wealth had been built partly through insider knowledge and manipulation of royal policies. Prince Alexander ultimately made the difficult decision to annul his marriage to Lady Catherine, recognizing that their relationship had been built on deception and that maintaining it would compromise his ability to serve the kingdom effectively. The decision was painful but necessary for his future role as king. The security reforms implemented following the conspiracy's exposure included enhanced background checks for all palace personnel, improved communication encryption, and new protocols for monitoring potential infiltration attempts. These measures would help prevent similar conspiracies from threatening the monarchy in the future. Helena Blackwood's extensive intelligence network was systematically dismantled, with many of her operatives facing legal consequences for their participation in the conspiracy. Her cooperation with authorities helped identify additional threats and vulnerabilities that might otherwise have remained hidden. The kingdom's response to the conspiracy demonstrated the resilience of Eldorian institutions and the loyalty of those who served the crown with integrity. The crisis ultimately strengthened the monarchy by exposing and eliminating threats that could have caused far greater damage if left unchecked. Marcus Wellington's investigation and the subsequent exposure of the conspiracy became a case study in royal security and the importance of vigilant protection of constitutional institutions. His dedication to duty and courage in facing powerful interests served as an example for future generations of royal guards and public servants. The Blackwood conspiracy's failure marked the end of the most sophisticated attempt to subvert the Eldorian monarchy, but it also served as a reminder of the constant vigilance required to protect democratic institutions from those who would exploit them for personal gain. King Edmund's leadership during the crisis reinforced his reputation as a wise and decisive ruler who placed the kingdom's welfare above personal considerations. His handling of the conspiracy and its aftermath demonstrated the strength of his commitment to justice and the rule of law. The kingdom emerged from the crisis stronger and more secure, with improved safeguards and a renewed appreciation for the loyalty and integrity of those who served the crown faithfully. The conspiracy's exposure had been traumatic, but it ultimately reinforced the values and institutions that made Eldoria a stable and prosperous nation. In the years that followed, the Blackwood conspiracy would be remembered as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the importance of institutional vigilance. Marcus Wellington's courage and dedication ensured that the kingdom's independence and constitutional monarchy would endure for future generations, protected by those who understood that true loyalty sometimes requires the courage to reveal uncomfortable truths.